very good morning to you. I'm Howard Feldman. This is the Sunday Synthesis Podcast with me, Howard Feldman, and of course, Dr. Anton Meyberg. It is March the 6th, and we are going to bring you all of the information that we possibly can. First of all, good morning, Dr. Anton Meyberg. Well done for your run this morning. That was pretty impressive. How are you feeling?
Thank you. Yeah, good, thanks. It's always nice to go on a nice run in the mornings. Nice to be back into the frame of doing half marathons on a Sunday morning. Long may it continue, and good riddance to COVID. Please God, it doesn't affect us anymore along these pathways.
Let's start. How are we doing? Where are we? Where do we go from here, I guess?
Okay, so I think let's go through the numbers, and I think we can talk about how to go forwards. But there currently are 445 million cases worldwide, with 6 million deaths and 378 million cases resolved. The United States has 80 million cases with 983,000 deaths. India has 42 million cases with 515,000 deaths. United Kingdom has 19 million cases with 162,000 deaths. South Africa is sitting on 3,683,172 cases with 99,543 deaths and 1,735 new cases in the last 24 hours, a 5.8% test positivity rate. Over the last 2 weeks, admissions into hospital have gone down by 27% in Gauteng. And we've noted that the BA2 variant of Omicron has increased from 5% in December to 78% in February of the causative viruses that's been causing COVID in our sort of genome. In the 18 to 34-year-old age group, there have been 590 hospitalizations. Of those 590 hospitalizations, 510, 86% are unvaccinated.
So that's staggering. I mean, there's your answer about vaccines right there, isn't it?
100%. No doubt about it.
Have we exited the fourth wave?
So, interestingly enough, yesterday, Saturday, March the 5th, was 2 years since the first COVID-19 case was officially recorded in South Africa. 2 long, painful years. We have officially exited the fourth wave, the Omicron fourth wave. The wave officially started on the 2nd of December. We probably exited about 2 weeks ago. However, we did note that there was an uptick in cases towards the end of January, and that was because of the opening of schools and that subvariant BA2, which started to spread in late January. So according to Prof. Abdul Karim, our waves are very cyclical and very regular. In other words, the period between the waves is basically about 3 months between the end of the wave and the starting of a new one. And at the moment, our cases are very low. We can predict that there will be a fifth wave, but it needs to be driven by a new variant because of the fact that more people are getting vaccinated. So we're looking at about a 94-day period of waves. And if there is a fifth wave, it should likely be at the end of April. But as you said, that's also dependent on if there's a new variant to push a wave to develop.
Is it expected that we will have a new variant by then?
You see, I think the thing we're going to understand is we're going into winter. So when you go into winter, you kind of predispose yourself to infection from the fact that people are congregating indoors. People are obviously not going to be wearing masks, which we're seeing a lot more of now. There's going to be a combination of influenza, a combination of RSV, a combination of corona. So it is expected, but not predicted definitively, if that makes any sense, because we've learned from this virus and this pandemic that we cannot predict anything in this virus because this virus has got a mind of its own, and anything can happen. But the one fact we've got in our favor is vaccinations.
Right. Given what's going on in terms of the numbers, given what's going on in terms of our own behavior, actually, should we now be removing restrictions?
Look, I definitely think we've come to a stage now where we definitely need to ease the restrictions. Now is definitely the time because we had a much lower risk. Case numbers are lower, but we can't just throw everything out just yet. We've got to take it slowly but methodically. You've got to look at the restrictions, let's look at mass gatherings indoor. You need to wear masks. Indoor activity requires masks, but outdoors, I firmly believe we should be able to drop masks, especially with vaccinated people. Can't do it yet because the government hasn't given the go-ahead, and I don't quite understand why not, but we're definitely at the stage where we should be dropping masks outside. The problem is if we don't drop masks outside, people are already getting mask sort of fatigue, and people are going to stop wearing their mask and they're going to drop the ball or not. So I think we also got to use vaccines as a measure here. You know, if you're at an indoor activity and if you're at a restaurant or a gym where masks are often not worn, it should then be restricted to vaccinated people. So we don't have to make vaccines mandatory or compulsory, but we can say is that if you come to one of these places, you're not allowed entry unless you're vaccinated. And in that way, you're protecting the people that are there that are vaccinated. So it's not mandatory, it's not compulsory. Another thing that we should be easing very much so now, we dropped the temperature checking a long time ago, but we should be easing the sanitizing of hands on entering places. You know, it definitely is a stage now where it could be done away with. The risk of transmission from fomites and onto the hand is a much less or much lower risk than we thought it was initially. So I think that we just got to go forward and hope they're going to drop requirements soon. We're also seeing that at passport control and entry South Africa, they're going to be dropping testing to come back in South Africa in the next week to 2 weeks. And what they're going to do is they're going to just ask you for a proof of vaccination. So that's a very positive step forward. And there are lots of measures and lots of things to do to try and ease the restrictions, but I definitely believe it can be done.
Why haven't we? I mean, is there a sense that we've kind of lost interest in keeping up with relevant measures? Because there's no, I mean, people aren't wearing masks. I'm not wearing masks, certainly not outside. And legal or not legal, it's just not happening. You can make it illegal, but you can't arrest 50 million people. Nobody is wearing masks outside. Why isn't government recognizing this and managing it accordingly?
Yeah, you see, I think the thing is people are hurtful. People have had enough, and rightfully so. It's been 2 long years. So why is government not giving the go-ahead? I don't know. Maybe there's fear. Maybe they want to keep the mandate of the state of emergency or state of disaster for longer. Who knows why? I don't believe it's the right decision. I really do believe that we're at a stage now where we can actually drop a lot of these restrictions, but we've got to wait for the powers that be to give us the go-ahead. I mean, if you look all over the world, United Kingdom are dropping their mandates. The CDC in America are saying that 90% of places can drop their mandates for masks. We need to be following the world now and moving in that direction, especially saying that we've got a large percentage of people that are vaccinating, more vaccinating as we go along. And because of the fact is that we know that we're reaching some sort of herd immunity in this country because we believe up to 70% of people do have some sort of antibodies.
You mentioned earlier about hand sanitizing. I mean, you go to a shopping mall and you basically come back like, you know, your hands are the cleanest hands in the world. But what about shaking hands? I see that people are starting to shake hands again. I'm seeing it in a business environment. People are a little awkward in social.
That's a problem. I'll tell you because, yeah, look, we're saying that sanitizing is becoming a bit antiquated. But shaking hands is still a problem for the reason that when you shake your hand, you tend to, especially not wearing a mask, touch your face or touching, and it's a much easier way of spreading it there, especially if the person themselves has just coughed into their own hand and then shake your hand. Then there's a much higher risk of spread. So, you know, a lot of people are fist pumping, a lot of people are thinking, you know, let's go with the times. Let's try be as moderate as possible in an evolving vaccine, in an evolving virus world, and try and actually fit in a way that we can all manage this. So I would try and avoid shaking hands. Fist pumping you can do, but, you know, just wash your hands regularly. I mean, that's more important. I mean, pandemic or no pandemic, we should be washing our hands regularly throughout the day.
Right.
With soap and water.
Not just a pandemic thing, eh?
No, can you believe it, eh?
Wow.
So when you go to the bathroom today, just don't forget, eh?
Oh, I'm going to make a note for myself to do that. Right. So in other words, what you're saying is, and it's not regulations, but if you were making a recommendation for government, you would say masks indoors, especially in a closed area with a high density amount of people. You would say no masks outdoors. You would say drop the lunatic hand sanitizing, but don't yet shake hands, fist pump, do whatever you're comfortable with. But that's really where you're at the moment.
100%. We're definitely moving forward. We definitely can drop a lot of the restrictions. As you say, the case numbers are extremely low at the moment. We're out of the wave. There's no new sub-variants that we're worried about or variants that we're worried about at the moment. Let's live a little.
And what's happening at schools?
So schools are still keeping masks on at the moment. It's still mandatory. The government is still ensuring that you have to wear masks in class. And we are seeing a large number of children that are getting infected. So for now, it's still the right decision. I think when we get more kids vaccinated and we get more adults vaccinated, hopefully we'll be able to drop the masks in schools as well.
And that's the other thing, is children under 12 have not yet in South Africa at least been allowed to get the vaccine.
So I still believe that we should push for children between the ages of 5 to 11 to be vaccinated. There is a low number of severe infections, but these could be avoided if the children are vaccinated. They can get MIS-C. We know that it's severe illness, and we can reduce the risk of them becoming vectors of the virus and basically carrying it to adults. So it's basically a community benefit and a benefit to themselves to have these children vaccinated. The same way you vaccinate children when they're born, same way it's 6 weeks, 10 weeks, there's no difference in vaccinating them with this.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. Is there still a benefit in vaccinations?
Definitely still a benefit, no doubt about it.
And natural infection, the benefit of natural infection?
So if you have a natural infection, we know now that the antibody is weighing quite quickly, about 2 to 3 months after you've had the infection. However, we know that vaccine immunity wanes a lot slower and a lot longer after that. So I think we've got to also remember a very important thing, that if you get Omicron now, let's say, first of all, you don't want to get the virus. You really don't want to get the virus. Yes, it's milder, and yes, it's not as bad as before, but speak to many people who've got Omicron now who have got post-COVID long symptoms with the fatigue, with the coughing, with the neurological side effects. It's not fun. People are saying that they get to 8 o'clock at night and they can't keep their eyes open. They can't function fully. They've got neuralgia, they've got nerve problems, a lot of headaches, coughing, a lot of things that are happening that really aren't fun to get. And if you ask people if they would have really preferred to get COVID or not, they say, well, after these long symptoms, they'd rather stay away from them. What we do know is that the best immunity, however, is what we call a hybrid immunity. And that's a combination of natural immunity and vaccine immunity. And that can give you up to about 100-time-fold antibody cover from just general vaccine or just general natural infection. So in other words, that goes to the point of saying that if you have had COVID, you still should get a vaccine because you can increase your antibodies dramatically with the vaccine.
Is it better to get Omicron now then, and in case the next variant is more virulent? Or do we see a natural progression of a pandemic where the variants become less effective or less?
Look, I think eventually we've got to realize that the pandemics can't continue to evolve forever. They can't continue to mutate like they're mutating because they reach a ceiling, they hit a wall with people who are vaccinated. And that's the point of the vaccinations worldwide, not only with COVID, with polio, with influenza, with all these things. Eventually you can't mutate to a degree where you're going to cause severe pandemic destruction like we've seen. So in other words, it will become endemic. So as we said earlier, you don't want to get Omicron if you can avoid it because of the long COVID, but you'd far rather get Omicron than getting Beta or Delta.
Right. A few people have asked about the concern with doing exercise whilst you've got Omicron. In other words, they might not have known it. They might have thought they had allergies, gone on a long hike or went for a run. Is this a concern with Omicron?
So one of the concerns that we've said many times before is that you can get what you call a myocarditis, which is inflammation of the heart muscle. If you've got COVID and you do exercise, you're not definitively going to get a myocarditis, but you increase your risk of myocarditis. And that's damage to the heart muscles. So if you've had asymptomatic COVID and you've been exercising and you didn't know about it, chances are you really shouldn't get it, but there's no guarantees. But if you've got COVID and you're quite sick and you do exercise, there's a much higher propensity to developing this myocarditis and damage to your heart muscle and getting consequent damage and fatigue and chest pain and shortness of breath and palpitations, etc., etc.
So if you are slightly symptomatic, it could just be a bit of cold or an allergy, and you go for a run and you see that you're monitoring your heart rate and your heart rate remains pretty much like it normally is. It's not much higher. Is that what we should be looking out for?
Well, I think if you are symptomatic, rather give it a few days. Rather don't exercise if you're symptomatic. It's the same as with influenza. There's also a higher chance of getting an inflammation of your heart muscle. So don't be foolish. Rather just give yourself a few days to make sure you're okay. I'm not saying everybody with a sniffle needs to test, but just be more responsible.
Should we still be testing?
I don't believe there's a reason to test at this point in time unless you've got severe COVID. I mean, if you're symptomatic, rather just stay at home.
Yeah. I think that is. And in terms of mixing vaccines, lots of questions again about mixing vaccines. Where are we with that?
It boggles my mind. I mean, we've been saying for months, mix the vaccines.
Yes.
No, we really have. This is something that which I just can't understand. We've been saying for months. Get an mRNA vaccine and get a vector vaccine. In other words, a Pfizer vaccine, a Johnson & Johnson. Now, all of a sudden, the government have woken up 2 years later to say, we think you can now mix your vaccines.
Stumbled across the podcast.
I mean,
that makes sense. Why didn't somebody? Right?
It's crispy and clear. Evidence clearly states that you should mix and match your vaccines. There's no doubt about it. You get a far better immune response by mixing and matching. And actually, I think on Friday or Thursday, they sent out a memorandum so that healthcare workers who got 2 J&Js are now eligible to get a third Pfizer. So in the next 2 or 3 weeks, that will be available to people who've got 2 J&Js to mix it with another Pfizer.
Wow. Okay. So that's that's very clearly sending that exact message. So
and then once they've done the healthcare workers, they're going to increase and sort of include the rest of the population. So in other words, they're saying mix and match.
And how long after you've had Omicron should you wait until you have the vaccine, your booster?
There's actually no definitive guidelines for this. What we do say, if you've had asymptomatic Omicron and you're really being okay, wait about 2 weeks. But if you were symptomatic, wait a month.
Right. And those of us with asymptomatic long COVID, that's fine. We can still have the booster, right?
Remember, you've got to wait 8 weeks to call it long COVID. I'm just saying, put it out there for a friend.
Asymptomatic long COVID. I think that might be different. You want to read up on that. You want to read up.
Definitely, I'll phone a friend.
People like me that are suffering from asymptomatic long COVID, and I think it kicks in very, very early. I'm not even sure you need COVID in order to have had it. That's what makes it nuanced.
No comment.
Right, fine, fair enough. And this is why nobody asks me my opinion on COVID. All right, here's a question, another one I wanted to get to you. What do you think of Israel now pushing for the 4th vaccine? Should we wait for that, or should we go along with it and have the 4th booster? This is from a young
Yeah, I'm not convinced I'm rushing to have a 4th booster myself. I think that for me, 3 vaccines are adequate for now. But if you are severely immune suppressed, if you've got multiple sclerosis, or if you're on chemotherapy and you're getting all these drugs that will dampen your immune response, and you're not getting an adequate immune booster from these vaccines, you are that type of candidate that does require a 4th one. So you've got to look at it in entirety. You've got to look at what your conditions are, what's wrong with you, and see that if you sort of would benefit from it. And I think that cohort of people will definitely benefit from a 4th booster. I don't think in entirety everyone should have their 4th boosters now, but we can wait a bit before we go down the sort of pathway of 4th boosters or 4th vaccines.
The 4th vaccine. Have we therefore reached an endemic phase?
We haven't reached an endemic phase yet, but we're getting there.
But what defines it?
I think you can understand the pandemic is when multiple countries all over the world are showing cases of the same type of virus with people getting affected, people getting sick. Once the numbers start going down worldwide, then we'll be moving into an endemic phase. I still believe, and that's another one of my personal beliefs, is there's no point in registering the amount of people that get COVID because it's a false measurement, because multiple people are now doing rapid tests. They're not even doing PCR tests, so those aren't being registered. What we need to be saying is how many people are being admitted to hospital. That should be our guideline to show us where we're at and how things are going.
Right. So that is really the case. Travel, you're comfortable. What you're really saying is get back to normal life. Your recommendation is, with the exception of if you're in an indoor crowded area, wear a mask, and try and avoid the handshaking. aside from that, get on with your life. That's really what you're saying. Am I right?
Be responsible. Wear your masks in appropriate settings. Protect the elderly. Protect those people with comorbidities. Just use your brain. It's very simple.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a concern about government, that they haven't changed these rules, is because it now really does become more important that we start making our own decisions, because the decisions that are being made by government are not keeping up with the reality of what's on the ground. Would you agree?
Well, that's always been a problem. We've said that from the beginning. They started off at this level and they went boom down to that level at warp speed.
In terms of a vaccinated population, is the vaccine likely to assist in everybody transmitting it? In other words, if I get sick once I've had the vaccine, does that impact on the transmissibility of the virus?
So, it's important that, because people who are vaccinated can still get infected, but there's a low amount of virus. In other words, they've got a lower viral load, therefore they're less infectious. So vaccinated people are infectious for a shorter period of time than unvaccinated individuals. And recently a study came out in the New England Journal of Medicine where they looked at 150,000 contacts of people who had tested. And if the person who was infected had been vaccinated with at least 2 doses of an mRNA vaccine, like a Pfizer vaccine, that individual had a 68% lower chance of spreading the virus to his or her household contacts, which is very important and very interesting.
Yes, that is.
And I mean, we're still using these first generation vaccines now, which have been based on the original version of the SARS-CoV-2 that was extracted from Wuhan. What's in the pipeline now is the new generation of vaccines. And these are so-called pan-coronavirus vaccines. And these are going to be able to target new mutations that are developing and protect you from all the different types of variants that can affect you, the ones that haven't even emerged yet. So those are in the pipeline in the development in the next while. And no doubt in the near future, we'll be having a pan-coronavirus, which will be probably embedded with a flu vaccine. So you'll have a dual vaccine.
Right, which is absolutely incredible. So you'll go for one vaccine a year that'll cover you for flu, for coronavirus, and hopefully all the new variants.
Right, 100%.
That's really phenomenal. So we've been doing this podcast of course, we started off doing it every week when we needed to. We've reduced it to every second week. My feeling is, Dr. Anton Meyberg, unless you feel differently, is that we can now start to do it every third, maybe fourth week, just depending on if there's new information. And part of that is a message that we're moving forward, that life is, in fact, getting back to semi-normal. What's your thought around that?
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think that if we have some earth-shattering news or something major develops, we'll hit it on the podcast earlier. But I think every 3 to 4 weeks is a very reasonable time. And that definitively agrees with you. That's saying that, we are moving forward. We are going in a positive direction. It's time to start moving on and time to start just, living a bit more normally, but with still certain requirements.
Right, and I think that's very important. So we'll let you know exactly when that will be. It'll either be 3 weeks from today or 4 weeks from today. In the interim, though, keep sending us your questions, because that way we can get a sense of if there's concerns, what you need to know, even if we put together a very quick podcast just to answer those questions if there's a need. But be assured that if anything changes before the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks, we will come back to you. We've got an eye on it. We are absolutely concerned first and foremost about bringing you accurate and real-time information. Dr. Anton Meyberg, is there good news?
So there's fantastic news. There's unbelievable news.
On his face. And I suspect it's not about your brilliant run this morning of
it's got nothing to do with running. It's got to do with a different type of run, okay?
Yes, exactly.
The Reds won the Carabo Cup. What a great game. What a stunning game. Great win for the Reds. Through to the next round of the FA Cup this week. Beat West Ham last night. 3 valuable points. And now I've got to say this with a heavy heart and a sigh, but I've got to say it. There's a huge point of contention. Today is a very difficult day for any Scouser. But we've actually got to think with our heads and not with our hearts. So go Man United, rah, rah, rah. Beat Man City, you can do it. We've got to try and actually hope that you can actually do something for once and actually beat another team. So, rah, 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 go Man United and help give us the league. And to quote,
words you never thought you would hear Anton Meyberg say.
Heavy heart.
Heavy heart, all right.
And to quote, sometimes not saying anything is the best answer. You see, silence can never be misquoted.
Well, words that I certainly don't live by, but thank you for that. Anton Meyberg, thank you as always. Synthesis, thank you for supporting this podcast. This has been another Sunday Synthesis COVID podcast with me, Howard Feldman, and of course, Dr. Anton Meyberg. We'll catch you in a few weeks. Keep sending your questions, subscribe below. Be safe and God bless.